Reviewing amendments, creating amendment lists and recording outcomes for the UK. This is a demonstration on what the interface for a new drafting and amending tool could look like. It demos what functionality and key concepts will be included as part of reviewing amendments submitted for tabling, creating the various amendment lists, and also recording outcomes of amendments. Reviewing submitted amendments. I shall start from the dashboard. The user can go straight to amendments when they first log in from the dashboard view by finding the relevant bill and selecting the Amendments button. This will load the Amendments tab, which lists all amendments that a user has the privilege to see. For instance, if you are a drafting lawyer for the OPC, you will only be able to view amendments that you or someone in your team has drafted at any status. And for amendments drafted by someone outside of your team, you will only be able to view them once they have been published and are available to the public. If you are a Parliament clerk, you will be able to view amendments that you or someone in your team has drafted at any status, and other teams' amendments once they have been submitted for tabling. You will not be able to view another team's draft amendments. To find out more about the functionality available on this wireframe, please view the Drafting and Managing UK Amendments screencast. Whenever an amendment has been submitted from the OPC, a notification will be sent to the Commons Public Bill Office or Lords Legislation team to let them know that a new amendment has been submitted for lodging. In these wireframes, we've represented this notification by way of a badge that appears on the Amendments tab. It should also appear on the dashboard so that you do not have to be within a project to see that a new amendment has been submitted. To review the submitted amendments, the user could click on the badge. This wireframe shows all amendments submitted which haven't been dealt with yet. The options for dealing with submitted amendments are Accept, which will be selected once the Commons and Lords Parliament clerks have performed their checks on the amendment's content and format. Reject, which will be used if there is a reason why it cannot be accepted. If an amendment is rejected, the Parly Council would be able to resubmit it if it was a case of further updates required. Or on hold. This is to acknowledge that the amendment has been received but may be pending further action or checks before it can be accepted or rejected. To help with the checking process, the Parliament clerk will be able to do the following. If they want to see the traditional formatted amendment in more detail, they could show and hide it within the amendment list. The first amendment is an example of this. If the Parliament clerk wishes to see the amendment in line or wants to check all the amendment metadata, they could select the View and Edit button. This would open the Amendment Editor window, which looks like this. The Parliament clerk would be able to make changes to the inline and or traditional formatted amendment if they felt it was necessary. They would need to get the inline amendment in a state that it could be automatically inserted into the bill if it were agreed to. Although not shown on the wireframes, there would probably need to be a flag to the Parliament clerk if the drafting lawyer had changed the traditional style amendment without the inline equivalent being updated. This would give them a prompt to check that the inline equivalent was the same as the traditional format, so that if the amendment was agreed to, it could be safely auto-inserted into the bill. There is an opportunity to add a comment against each amendment. This comment will only be visible by Parliament clerks. It could be used to capture what checks have been done or what piece of information is outstanding if it is on hold. There is also a date time option to override the system date timestamp that was set at the time the amendment was submitted. Parliament clerks can either accept, reject or put the amendments on hold one by one or by using the checkboxes and using the buttons across the top. It is also possible to create a list of one or more selected amendments if required. Here is an example of what that list could look like in traditional format. Finally, there is an option to filter this list of amendments if there are a lot of submitted at one time. These filters include whether to filter by a particular member, with the option to include amendments that they are recorded as sponsors as well. You might want to search by amendment type, but following user testing, this wasn't popular. You can filter by amendment status, so if you've put quite a few on hold, you could select the filter button and only view the ones that are on hold. You could view filter by topic if this is a function that you or someone in your team has used. If the drafting lawyer decided to make their topics public, you would be able to use their topics as filter options as well. You can choose to filter by stage. The default view will be for the current stage, but it will be possible to view amendments from a previous or even a future stage. You can also filter by clause or schedule if you want to see all amendments for a particular provision. You might want to filter the list by date. And finally, you might wish to filter by party, which will rely on this information being derived from the member who lodged the amendment. These tabled amendments will now be ready for inclusion on an official amendment list. If the amendment was put on hold, it would appear on the review amendment list, but the badge would no longer include the amendment as it is not a new requirement. Creating official amendment lists. When the Parliament clerk is ready to produce the official amendment list, they would go to List Management. This tab is where users should come when they want to view a published list or if they want to create an amendment list. There are two types of amendment list. Official amendment lists. These are any lists that may be produced by the Commons Public Bill Office or the Lords Legislation Office during the amendment process. These lists will not be made available to drafting lawyers in the OPC. The other type of list is the ad hoc list. These look very similar to the official amendment lists and use a similar process, including the order of consideration. However, it will be clearly marked that these are not official copies of the amendment lists. Ad hoc lists can be created by any user. It is intended that this screen will display all lists that have been produced, defaulting to the current stage. Drafting lawyers in the OPC will only be able to view published official amendment lists. They will not be able to see an amendment list that is currently being drafted by Parliament clerks. On this page, the user can perform the following actions. They can create a new list, depending on which type they've selected. They can view a list that has already been created. This will open it in read-only format if you're a drafting lawyer viewing a published official list. And they can create an order of consideration, which will be used by the system to order the amendments that appear in any of the lists if an order of consideration was selected. I will show you how an order of consideration could work. This table allows users to specify the order in which the bill will be considered. At the bottom will be a list of previous orders of consideration. If the order was to change at any point during the stage. To specify an order, the user will use the drop-downs and free text fields to build up the order, adding more layers as required with the Add Another Order button. The system will present a preview of the order of consideration as the user constructs it. Once the user is happy with the order of consideration, they can save it, which will return them to the list management page. I will now demonstrate how creating an amendment list could work by creating a new Marshaled list for the Lords. How each list is created will depend on certain rules built into the system for each list. For example, when beginning the Marshaled list creation process, the system will present to the user a list of all amendments that have already appeared on any previous daily sheets, either from the start of the current stage or since the last marshalled list was created. If not all amendments were dealt with on the last marshalled list, any without outcomes will also be presented in this list. The rules will be discussed and agreed in more detail when development begins, but this gives an insight into what the system can do. On this page, the user has the flexibility to remove any amendments they do not want to include on the list by clicking the checkboxes. They also have the opportunity to specify the order of consideration if they haven't done it yet. When they are sure they have all the amendments they need and have specified the order of consideration, they will click on Generate Marshalled List. The system will ask the user to confirm what order they want to apply to the amendments. The order of the bill, this is the default order that sections and schedules appear in the bill. For example, when a particular section calls a set schedule, this schedule would appear after the relevant section. Date and time, this applies to the date and time that the amendment tabled, so that the one tabled earliest came first. Order of consideration, this will be used the most recent order of consideration. Once the user has specified the order they want to apply, the system will automatically sort the selected amendments and present them back to the user in a list. At this point, the user can do any last-minute adjustments to the order by dragging and dropping amendments into the preferred order. To satisfy the requirement to add certain bits of rubric to handle various exceptions, the user can view the marshalled list in the editor window, which will allow them to add extra rubric as required, but without editing the actual amendments themselves. Although not shown on the wireframes, there will need to be functionality to allow the Parliament clerk to publish the amendment list when they have finished with it. Recording decisions. Once the amendments have been voted on, the outcome should be recorded on the system. This could happen in situ in the committee or chamber, or afterwards, as is currently the process. This is what the Record Decision page could look like for the Lords. When the user clicks on Record Decision tab, the system will load all amendments appearing on the most recent marshalled list, including any manuscript amendments, which do not already have an outcome recorded against them. Against each amendment, there is a drop-down of all possible outcomes. There is also the opportunity to record vote information against each amendment. Once the user has completed recording the decisions against each amendment, any recorded as agreed will be ready to apply to the revised version of the bill. This will be covered in the screencast for applying amendments to a bill in the UK version. The Commons page will look very similar, apart from the drop-down will be different according to their choices, and the vote information will be ayes and noes. This is the end of the screencast.